Hey everyone, this is Tim Halverson with Sevenfold, where we unlock your creativity through the power of design technology and architecture. In this one, we're going to be doing a really quick tip workflow in Grasshopper and Rhino, and all we're going to be doing is exploring how to create a stub profile and do that along a custom shape. And let's just pop in to see a preview of what we're going to be doing. If we look here, this is an example, and what we have is this curve, and if we just hit F10 to turn on control points. 1 second. There we go. And we can move this around. You can see that this shape is going to be adapting based on the movement of this curve, and it's going to be locating these things on center. And then I can even customize this profile shape to be whatever I want. And then finally, we just add this little gradient color throughout that. And you can basically reuse this. It's really short. It should only take 5 to 10 minutes. A couple components that you're going to want to get is L-fronts. We use this all the time. You should download it right now at Food for Rhino. There's a link in the description below, as well as we use human quite a bit as well. And so it should only take you 5 to 10 minutes. So if you are as excited as I am, go ahead, strap up, and I will see you inside. Okay, so once you have gone ahead and opened up a fresh Rhino, why don't you go ahead right away and just launch Grasshopper. And what we want to start is double click in Grasshopper there just to close it, and we're just going to draw our curve. It's doing a control point curve, drawing any shape that you want. We can totally edit this later, but let's just get a curve. And then opening up Grasshopper, going to the Params tab. If you don't have it like this, right click and say display as icons. And then just grabbing a curve container, you can right click on that container and set one curve and pick our curve that we just put in. And I'm just going to move this to the side just so I can see a little bit better. And just so we're not distracting, I'm going to just get it out of the way here. Okay, cool. So then there's a couple ways that we can start to work with this. We want to go ahead and just divide curve. Now there's a couple options: divide curve, divide length, divide distance. And we're going to start with, just to show it in concept, we're going to do this divide curve. Okay, and by default, it's just taking a number count. 10 you can see there as the input. And if I was to just put a slider down by doing 1 less than 10 less than 50, it's going to give me a slider starting at 10 between 1 and 50. And if I put that in and start to crank this up, you can see on the left, it's going to be growing, okay? Super cool. Now, if we want to, we can just simply type in move. And this is going to ask for geometry to come in and T for transform. And you can see if I hover, that icon right there means vector. So we need a vector. And I just want to move these vertically. So keep it pretty simple. For a challenge, we'll talk about a challenge later. So just type Z for unit Z, and this is going to move it vertically. I'm going to go ahead and also give myself another slider, typing in 0.00 less than 15, and then plugging that in and plugging that into the T, and then also taking these points and plugging that into the G. Now it's going to start to move as I slide this forward up to 15. Now, I was expecting it to be 15 feet, but what is going on here? Well, this is actually listening to my model units, and my model units happens to be in inches at the moment, so this is only 15 inches. Now, if I'd like to convert that to feet, in this case only, this is where the human tab is going to be great. So go ahead and get the human tab, and then navigate over to this convert to document units. And if I do that and I plug this in and I want to turn it into feet, I can just do concatenate and just use the foot symbol by doing quotes and then a little apostrophe there. And I can plug that in. And so now I'm getting this out 15 feet. And so as I slide this, you can see it's changing rather than having an explicitly typed 15 feet. But then I can plug that into this V here that's going to convert it to my document units, which is inches in this case, so 180 inches. And then I can just pipe that into the F for factor. And now There we go. That's moving up to 15 feet. So this could be my ceiling height. This could be my floor to floor height. It's whatever I imagine it to be. and I've got it on a slider. Okay, so I'm just gonna right click on this input and just change it to height of geometry. You can say height of studs, you can say height of whatever. I'm just gonna keep it neutral. And then we're gonna come over here, and now we wanna bring these 2 points together. Now, what's interesting is if I was to do it just as is, I could do it as a line. That's easy enough. But my preferred way, so I could do B and I could do A here, and that's gonna create that line. But my preferred method is actually to graft it. So I'm gonna graph the tree, and I'm actually gonna do it with my original curves. Plug that in, and then actually plug those into the curve here. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna put each of these on their own curve. Actually, that's the input curve. What I want to do is actually, I want to graph the points, okay? And that's going to put each point onto its own branch right here, okay? Now, if I do Control Shift and then drag this out, put that in the input, and then reattach that, it's only recursive for 2 seconds there, so don't worry. And that's Control Shift, drag out, and then replug that in. Yeah, if I do that anytime, Control Shift, it drags everything that's plugged in. Super useful. What that does is if I type in ME for merge, and then type G and put these two into the merge here, it's gonna put both these points on the same branch. And that's great for many, many reasons, but typically I'm gonna use a polyline, and then later we're gonna just manage our data this way so that everything's grouped by a branch. And we've also got a line like curve there. So just, that was P line for polyline, or just a line as well. This is my preferred method. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch gears for 2 seconds and create our section profile that's gonna go on there. So if we go to a top view here, and let's just hide this guy, and let's zoom in to anywhere, and I'm just gonna grab a polyline, and actually let's make it fun. So I'm gonna do a spline again, and I'm just gonna make that kind of S shape I was doing before. Maybe edit this a little bit so it's a little bit more dynamic. And then I'm just gonna alt drag a copy. Actually, I'm gonna Control C, Control V in place, and then I'm gonna take this point and move them so it keeps the endpoints exactly where they're at. And I can start to flex this, but generally I don't want to have self-intersecting curves. And if I want to, I can work with this stuff, grab the points, and yeah, do whatever I want to do. Okay. And then once we're done with that, we just want to join those. So Control J to join, or hit the little puzzle icon up here. And then we're going to go ahead and come back to Grasshopper. Go back to the params tab, grab a plane container, and then we're just going to right click on it and say set one plane. And anywhere in here is fine. This is going to be the place that you reference along your curve. So if it's important to you, I'm going to keep it kind of arbitrary, but this is the point that's going to sweep. And then we also have to reference in our curve. So I'm going to bring another curve container in, right click that, set one curve, and pick my curve. Okay. It's a good idea to label stuff too. So I could just as easily right click and override the icon and give it a name and say section profile curve, just so you don't get lost with stuff. And I could say this is also the profile reference plane. Good idea is to keep stuff organized, annotate throughout. And yeah, so then let's go back to our perspective tab and zoom out for a second. And what we need to get is, sorry, 1 second. Where we're aiming is if we go to this transform tab and we go to Orient, this is our go-to command. And what this takes is our input geometry, which is our section curve here. It takes the reference initial plane, which is the one we just set, and then it takes a target plane, which we're going to attach to our lines that we made. Okay, so let's get these two in right away. And now we need to build our planes on the profiles that we're going to sweep against. So let's go back to our perspective and build our planes. So in order to do that, we're going to keep this really easy. We are going to go to the vector tab, construct the plane, and just put it on the point there. I like to, once it's in a line, I could have referenced it from back here, but I prefer to do endpoints right here so that I know if there's multiple vertices, I know I've always got the start point or endpoint. I'm going to put the start point in as the origin, and that's going to drop some planes in right here. Now this by default is going to be aligned to the world XY. So instead of keeping it that way, I actually want to give myself some flexibility to transform it. I'm going to go ahead and rotate plane, and then right clicking on the A input for angle, switching that to degrees, and then taking the plane and putting that for P. I'm also going to just give myself a slider from 0, maybe 36 to 90 or something. And then as we click that, and I'm just going to temporarily hide, right clicking and previewing off, I can start to rotate that plane however much I want. And I could change the slider to do as much as I want, but that's only one rotation per plane. We'll talk about in a second how we can make a dynamic rotation, but let's finish the sweeps before we get back to the dynamic rotation. Okay, so now we've got planes, and we're going to map that profile up to the planes. So you can see if we look in that Y is up, X is to the right, that's aligned with Y up, X to the right that we drew, and that's going to be adaptable as I change things. But essentially all I need to do is map that on, and then I can do double clicking, type in sweep 1, and then using my section profiles for S here, and then the rails are going to be the polylines we used way back here, plugging that in. And now we have our sweeps, which is super fun. And we can look in, and now if we just want to make that a solid closed poly surface, all we need to do is add cap holes. And then that's going to make it a solid capped piece up there. Okay. Now, one thing you might be asking is, how do I get this? This is great, it looks beautiful, but I actually need to be a little bit more constructible, and I need to specify a typical distance between these. Well, you're in luck, because there's actually a tool just for that. So if we were to do divide distance, which is up here, or length, but let's do distance. We could do the same workflow where we pipe in our curve, and then we could specify a distance. So I'm gonna do, let's do a slider, 1 less than 16 less than 36. So it's gonna give me a 16-inch on center distance. So what we can do is if we take that and if we switch, okay, so we have divided distance. We're going to switch that from number of divisions to a specified distance. And you can already see there's a bunch of points happening. But all we're going to do is change that component, and we're going to take the point output and swap that in. And right away, we can already see how that's changing. Now, if we wanted to, we could even reduce this down to be even tighter. I've just got a fixed amount of inches. Again, pick whatever document unit you prefer. And then if I wanted to, I could also work with this angle and rotate that. But again, it's a fixed angle on on all the geometry at the same time. Cool. Let's just look a little closer at what's going on here. That's pretty exciting. All right, so what do we want to do next? Well, one of the things I want to change is give myself a dynamic rotation along this, so that these open at different lengths. So in some places it's more closed, and other places it's more open. And in order to do that, I'm going to just show you one of many transformation methods. So we're going to work with this angle rotation right here. And what I'm going to do is pull up a graph mapper, and then right click on that graph mapper and go to graph types and change it to sine. Okay. And let's just leave it like that. We can always pull this and bring in a sine wave. I'm just going to leave it nice and smooth. And then what I'm going to do is take the origin points I'm using for my planes, and I'm going to pull those. Let's just do CP. So typing in CP, going up to curve closest point, and then pulling this point, my start point, to the original curve. And let's actually do it from the grafted curve. And now we can also right click on this and reparameterize. That's going to change it from the actual length to a percentage from 0 to 1, which is what we have here on this domain. So domain Y, domain X is 0 to 1 rather than the explicit length. And by pulling these down, it translates into that T value. That T value is the percentage parameter that we're talking about. So you can see here, it's some percentage along the way. And so it goes 50% here, and then it goes up to 80% there, and that's getting sampled along this graph mapper, or will be in a second. So as I pipe that in, the T value, that's gonna reparameterize that along this graph. And then what I wanna do is go to the Maths tab, construct a domain, and this is gonna be the range that my new angles are gonna go from. Okay, so let's grab a copy of our slider angle. So let's just alt drag a copy, bring that over, and then pipe in that 0. Let's just make another alt drag copy in for the B, and then let's just move that up to something like 90 degrees. And now if we go to this component, remap numbers, we can take these percentages and we can put those into the values. And our source, if we hover, is going to be 0 to 1 by default, so that's fine, we can leave it empty. And then our target, which is T, is going to be this new domain we just made. And so that's going to remap from here 89% to, in this case, 80 degrees, because we went from 0 to 90 degrees. And if I change this top height, it's going to change the max to something else. All right, so we're going to change that to 90 degrees, and then we're going to use that as the values we put in for the rotation. And what we just did is we created a pretty interesting relationship. Let's just take a look. So in these cases, this is pretty much rotated all the way open at 90. But then if we go down here and we just kind of use the 3D mouse, you can see that they're closing themselves because they're actually rotating closed. And so on a per sort of louver basis, it's incrementing along that sine curve between 0 and 90 degrees. And so if we were to actually change our profile to be something else, right, we could just as easily change that out to be something like this, more simple. And then I could reference in that curve and set the curve, click, right click, set one curve, plug that in. Whoops, wrong curve. 1 second. Right click, set one curve, and then we're gonna just Control Shift click and drag, type that in, and then go to perspective, and voila. There we go. And we can start to change the spacing. So if we knew the length of this, we could reduce this down to even like 8 inches, and that's going to tighten this up. And then as we orbit around, we can see that it's going kind of all the way closed here in some cases, and then we can make this more rational. But there's ways to do it against the tangent and stuff like that. But essentially, like, you've got a variable spaced louver. Very cool. 10 inches on center. All right, so to wrap this up, we can also do the color thing, I promised that. So all we need to do for that is just do gradient, type in gradient. Zooming in here, we can double click on the colors. We can double click and change the input colors. So let's just pick something. I'm gonna do this like chartreuse or long green. And then let's go pick the other one. And then I'll just double click here and maybe pick something else. Voila. Hit OK. There's our gradient. Piping in the same T from our curve closest point to this T here. That's gonna do the same exercise where it evaluates along this this gradient here, same as it did for the graph mapper. And then all we have to do is we can preview that if we want by just typing in PRE for preview, putting this color into the material, and then the geometry is going to be our capped geometry there. And if I just hide my red geometry, you can see right away that it is corresponding there. Now, if I wanted to change the color direction, I could just, in Rhino, click the curve that's driving all this and type flip. And you can see right away that that is going to change the curve from going from start to finish this direction. And I could just as easily do that in Rhino, or in Grasshopper, but you can do it in Rhino too. Flip the direction of the curve, and now we've got green on this side and blue on that side. So that's kind of fun. And if we want to test this quick too, we can also just grab our gumball, move this around, and it should continue to work as whatever shape we want. Okay. Finally, we're just going to bake this out. So now that we've got it all sort of square, we can, this is not necessarily, you can stop here if you want, but I'm just going to show you how to bake it out. So using L front, we're going to just drop a bake objects component in, and then it's asking for attributes and geometry and some stuff here, like the bake button. I'm going to grab this component here for defining object attributes, and that's going to go into the A. And then it needs a bunch of stuff. Really, we just want to control the color and the layer. So if I just type in value list and I put this L for layer into here, it's going to give me my layer options based on my Rhino model. And putting that in, I'm just going to pick layer 3, for example. And then the color, which is C, we're going to just use as our gradient down here. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and input the G for geometry to our capped geometry there. Now, if you want, you can, create a little button. That's what I typically do. And then right click on this input, change the display to hidden, and pipe that in. And then just changing that button, we can say bake out louvers or studs or whatever you want to call them. Be specific, it helps. And then you can put that towards the front where all the other controls are. So your distance, counts, etc. All those good things. And typically what I do over here is I just, with the little squiggle thingy in the upper left of your keyboard, I just typically name this control panel. And that's going to be just all the stuff that you want to control throughout your script. And yeah, that and this. And just right clicking and adding those to the group. This is the stuff that you want to control. So I typically keep that on the left side of this bar. You can do whatever you want, but that's a good idea. And then once you're ready, just go ahead and run the bake. And there you go. So I'm just going to hit Control N to do new. And let's just inspect what we got. So here's the actual baked geometry. It's on a per louver basis. If you wanted to get them as groups, all right, well, you're gonna have to deal with it. I would recommend working on your layer strategy to do sublayers, or you can concatenate, and you can say like quotes. There's quotes right there. In this case, for my model, I'm going to say layer 03, do 2 colons, and then you can say, let's just say maybe motif or something, dash, and then you could do 1 less than, 15, whatever. And then each time you increment, you're going to have to just change this. And that's going to be your layer number. And then rather than flattening this stuff, we're just going to pipe the colors directly in. We're going to pipe the geometry in like we did before. We're not going to use this stuff. And then as we bake, that's all going to work out. And you can also see it put it on its own dedicated layer. So if I want to select all these sublayer objects and Control G to group that in post, I can do so. But doing it sort of out of the box might be a little more tricky than we want to get into in this tutorial. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into this episode with Sevenfold. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you did like it, hit the like button, and we're going to be posting stuff every single week, so subscribe for future content. Leave a comment below. What did you learn? What was something new that you got out of this? And what do you think it could have done better? I'm continually learning from you guys as well, but this is supposed to be geared towards beginners, maybe intermediate, just to do a basic Grasshopper workflow. And I'm really excited to see what you make next. So if you haven't already, check out the BIM Academy, bimacademy.sevenfold.io. That's over on the website. We're going to have not only the free content here, but we're going to have a much more structured learning environment. It's going to be super good. You're going to get a lot more value out of that rather than navigating just the YouTube page. So check it out, head over there, and make sure you're on the email list and check out the learning library there. We're doing new things all the time. And so we're not going to be just covering Grasshopper. We're going to be getting into all different aspects of architectural practice. So if you want to see something very specific that's not Rhino Grasshopper specific, but feel free to reach out. Anything in architecture related to design technology, we're looking to cover that information. So reach out, leave us a message with what you want to see next, and we're excited to continue to create and learn with you. So stay curious and creative, my friends, and we will see you in the next one.